All right, so I got a pretty unfortunate update here for you guys on what is arguably the single worst humanitarian crisis facing the planet right now, and that is the ongoing Saudi-led blockade and bombing of Yemen, which has been pretty much throughout the entirety of his administration, fully supported and enabled by Joe Biden himself. So I got a couple different things that I want to get into. We're going to get into this recent bombing that just took place, and then we're going to get to a breakdown here by Trita Parsi, which is, one of the best that I've seen from an outlet, especially like MSNBC, basically just running through all of the broken promises of the Joe Biden administration, who, if you guys remember, on the campaign trail, basically said he was going to come into office and change the dynamic of the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia, right? He said he was going to treat them as the pariah that they are, and obviously he has not been doing anything remotely close to that. Now, let's get into this recent bombing that took place, okay? Because they say here from the Norwegian Refugee Council that more than 70 people, including women and children, were killed overnight in Yemen, and this was published on January 21st, so within the last week. And let's just get into some of the details, because as usual with a war like this, and with a state like Saudi Arabia that has absolutely no regard for civilian casualties whatsoever, it's pretty horrific. So let's just get into this. Aid agencies operating in Yemen are horrified by the news that more than 70 people, including migrants, women, and children, have been killed in Hodeidah and Seda, I'm sure I'm butchering those names, on Friday morning in a blatant disregard for civilian lives. And they say that in Seda, a holding facility for migrants was attacked overnight, among other buildings, killing 67 people and injuring 108, according to initial reports. And they say, unfortunately, that initial hospital reports suggest more than 100 people, mostly migrants, were also injured, and the true numbers might be higher as aid workers and paramedics clear the rubble and verify the information. And they say that in Hodeidah, 3 children were killed while playing football in a field, and at least 5 adults injured. And airstrikes have also damaged a telecommunications center, downing internet connection across the country and disrupting phone lines in several governorates. And they also say that these airstrikes come after 3 medical facilities and 1 water reservoir were attacked in this week alone. So let's just condense that and call this what it is. It's a bunch of war crimes, okay? You're killing, innocent children who are playing soccer in a field. You're striking medical facilities in a water reservoir that's civilian infrastructure. So these are war crimes, okay? They are brazen war crimes, and they are unfortunately war crimes that the United States and Joe Biden are fully complicit in aiding and abetting. And this is also coming, just to put this in context, it wasn't just this one single strike. The UN officials are warning of record-shattering month for civilian deaths in Yemen. So throughout the entirety of this absolutely horrific war led by Saudi Arabia and the United States with their support, this is the worst month. We're talking about the single worst month throughout what has already been, for months if not years, one of the worst humanitarian crises on the planet. Okay, so we are pretty much at as much of a red alert as you could possibly get right now. And again, now let's get into where the Joe Biden administration currently stands on this entire issue, and where he told us that he was going to stand, because surprise, surprise, he completely fucking lied about what he was actually going to do in his relation to Saudi Arabia. So again, great breakdown here by Trita Parsi, saying that Biden is enabling America's indefensible history with Saudi Arabia. And he says the U.S.'s back-to-basics approach to its Middle East policy is the problem, not the solution. So he says, when Yemeni Houthi rebels struck Abu Dhabi in the UAE, killing 3 people on January 17th, the Biden administration strongly condemned what it called terrorist attacks, and it was the 14th time that the State Department had condemned the Houthis since President Joe Biden entered the White House, okay? 14 times Joe Biden was criticizing the Houthi rebels, okay? Understand, this entire war in and of itself is led by Saudi Arabia. They are the offensive actor in this situation, okay? So to pretend or try to characterize this as if it's, Yemenis, rebels or something that are just out of nowhere striking the UAE, that's not it, okay? They are literally doing this in direct response to types of shit like this, okay? So they are the ones who are acting defensively in this entire situation, and yet they've called them terrorist attacks 14 times, okay? And I'm not endorsing what some of these people have been doing, because yes, if you go and strike innocent civilians, that's also a war crime. But let's put this into perspective of the entire conflict and the entire way that it started, which was again initiated, and the aggressor was Saudi Arabia from the beginning. And they say, to draw a comparison here, yet days later, okay, after they condemned these Houthi attacks as terrorist attacks, days later, when Saudi Arabians airstrikes killed at least 70 civilians in Yemen, including 3 children, the Biden team only mustered a meek call for all parties to de-escalate. And they say, despite the carnage, Biden sustained his perfect record for never condemning Saudi Arabia for its devastation in Yemen, let alone calling it terrorism. And it's time for Biden to make a real break with past U.S. policy by seeking to take sides in other countries' conflicts. And again, this is not something that's new. This type of rhetoric to the Joe Biden administration or to American presidents and State Department officials at all. This is exactly the type of rhetoric that we see in a conflict like between Palestine and Israel, okay? You would never see, even in this recent bombing campaign, Operation Guardian of the Walls back in May of 2021, when Israel was rampantly killing innocent men, women, and children. I mean, they killed literally dozens of children in this bombing campaign. It was the same one that they blew up the AP building, that they were blowing up, civilian infrastructure, just as Saudi Arabia was just doing. And as Israel is committing these brazen war crimes, that's the type of rhetoric that they always deploy. They say, we want both sides to de-escalate, even if one side is not only doing the vast majority of the damage and civilian casualties, but also on top of that, even when one side is being literally supported and militarily supplied by the United States, okay? And that is the case with Israel. That is also the case with Saudi Arabia. It's, completely different, but also kind of similar in the same nature of how this entire situation has been unfolding under Joe Biden. But they continue saying that in many ways, this unquestioning support for the Saudi dictatorship is unremarkable. Obviously, we know how Donald Trump handled this. They say Donald Trump coddled the notorious Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and even refused to slap him on the wrist after his intelligence operatives kidnapped and beheaded Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. And as president, Barack Obama had a contentious relationship with then Saudi King Abdullah, and yet it was Obama who greenlighted Saudi Arabia's war against Yemen in the first place. And the Bush family was so close to the Saudi royal family that Riyadh's longtime ambassador to Washington, Prince Bandar bin Sultan, was nicknamed Bandar Bush. Okay, so understand this is something that is consistent, as is most of the U.S. foreign policy agenda. It is consistent between Republicans and Democrats, okay? We went from Bush to Obama to Trump to Biden, basically continuing with the same exact nature of the U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia, even though they have been doing completely fucked up shit like this from the beginning. I mean, even if you want to go all the way back to the Bush administration, a vast majority of the 9/11 hijackers were from fucking Saudi Arabia. And what do? We turn around and we use that as an opportunity to go and attack Iraq and go and invade Afghanistan, 2 countries that had almost damn near nothing, at least their governments had damn near nothing to do with the attacks on 9/11. So again, it's something that just happens one administration to the next, and they will use, whatever the circumstances provide for them to justify continuing this relationship in this way. But they continue saying that Biden himself created the expectation that his presidency would see an end to business as usual with the Saudi dictatorship. And in his first major foreign policy speech in February, he declared that, quote, the war in Yemen must end. And during the presidential debates in 2020, he pledged to make the Saudis pay the price and make them, in fact, the pariah that they are, like I was just saying. But Saudi Arabia has yet to pay any price for its destabilizing activities, and the U.S. just sold the Crown Prince $650 million worth of advanced American weaponry. Nor has the Biden administration treated the Saudi government as the pariah that they are. So not only are we not treating them as a pariah, we're also literally selling them and equipping them with weapons. Okay, and here's the laughable part at the end of the day about all of this that makes it so much worse is Joe Biden is currently basically denying what he's actually doing. And this, again, it's, the parallels here between the situation with Israel and the situation with Saudi Arabia, even just on what the conclusion should be or what the solutions would be in a situation like this. There's a lot of overlap there because it's the same rhetoric, it's the same nature of the disproportionate war, if you want to call it that, or conflict that's going on, depending on how you want to characterize that. It's the same exact type of conflict, right? Because you have the United States and we're giving them basically unlimited and, unregulated military and logistical support to go and conduct these campaigns, whether it's Israel bombing the Gaza Strip or whether it's Saudi Arabia bombing innocent civilians in Yemen. We are providing them with these weapons. And the worst part about all of it is we turn around and say that they're defensive in nature. Okay, that's literally what Joe Biden was saying to justify throwing through that weapon sale. He said, I'm no longer going to be selling Saudi Arabia offensive weapons, right? And that was complete bullshit. They just made that distinction up. It's not a real distinction in any way, shape, or form if the entire campaign that Saudi Arabia is waging against Yemen is inherently offensive, right? You can't distinguish between offensive, defensive wars if the whole war is offensive by nature, okay? So it was just completely ridiculous from the beginning, but that's the fucked up way that he justifies it in his head to then say, oh, well, they're weapons that are killing innocent civilians. The United States has a little bit of blood on our hands, but what are we going to do? We're just using these for defensive purposes. It's complete nonsense. And the same applies with Israel, right? We give them completely unquestioned military aid, regardless of how many war crimes they commit with that military aid. And then we turn around and we say, oh, well, it's Hamas. Oh, well, it's the Palestinian Authority, and they're the ones who are breeding terrorists who are attacking Israel. It's never, admitting that the U.S. and our allies can in fact be the terrorists, can in fact be the aggressors and the offensive actors in many of these situations. But that is the reality on the ground, and Joe Biden, his administration, is continuing to exacerbate the basically single worst humanitarian crisis facing the planet right now.